We are, first of all, America's oldest regional entertainment paper. And that's really what we are. We're an entertainment paper with a strong emphasis on music. We've kept away from politics over the years. I just felt that we weren't really in a position to do an adequate job covering politics. Newsday had always been pretty good at that and pretty strong at it. Mm-hmm. And being an entertainment paper, we always covered the arts. We always covered music and film and theater and dining. And over the years, we've really evolved. Today, we have things in the paper like a bowling column. We have a skateboarding column in Good Times. Musically, we have The Dungeon, which is Swedish death metal. And in the same paper, we have a jazz and blues page. I came up with the idea of Good Times when I was at Columbia. And when I was graduating from Columbia, I had two job offers. One was to work for Jimi Hendrix.
Did you have an interview?
I didn't have an interview with Hendrix, although I got to tell you, even though we're on camera, my claim to fame is I did pee next to Hendrix once at a club called Ungano's, which was on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. As a Columbia student, we all used to go down to Ungano's just to watch all kinds of music. And in '68, '67, Hendrix wasn't the god that he became.
Right.
What happened was a fella.
Did you talk to him when you were in the men's?
No, you tried not to look. You didn't want to be obvious. But what happened was there was a guy in my marketing class named Jerry Goldstein. His brother was Michael Goldstein, and it turns out he was Jimi Hendrix's publicist. And he said to me, he came over to me one time in class, and he said, I understand that you are looking for a job, and you like to write, and you're into music, you love music. And he said, my brother handles Jimi Hendrix, would you be interested in coming down for an interview? Getting a job out of Columbia isn't as easy as it would seem. You have an MBA, but basically every company takes one student. So Procter & Gamble takes one Columbia and one Harvard guy. And I had been doing some interviewing, and I was going more in for the marketing end of it. I had gone down and interviewed with AT&T, and I had gotten a job offer to work for the management magazine, which was called the 195 magazine. And they offered me, at that time, the incredible starting salary, this is 1968, 69, of $210 a week. So I said, wow, that's a lot of money. So I go down to interview for the job with Hendrix, and Michael is explaining to me exactly what's involved. He says, well, you'll be traveling around the country with Jimmy, and you'll be going to all the clubs with him. You'll be writing some press releases, which is what I thought the job was. Publicity, to me, was writing. Right. And he says, but, the big part of your job will be, before the gig starts, you're going to collect money from the club owner because Jimmy is always getting stiffed. So here I am, I'm thinking about it. I said, well, let me think here. Let's think this through. I've just spent 2 years on all this money that I borrowed to get an MBA, and I've got this job offer from AT&T, $210 a week against $95 a week with Hendrix. And I thought about it. I said, well, it'd be really great to work for him. I said, but I don't want to have to collect money from bar owners. Never imagining that 40 years later, I would be dealing with bar owners, and that's what I do every 2 weeks, go to all the clubs on Long Island and get the money from them. One day my secretary buzzes me and she says, excuse me, Mr. Branciforte, I've got a Mr. K on the phone. I figured it's somebody from Long Lines or Bell or something. I go, Branciforte, 195 magazine. And just like on the radio, this voice goes, hey, Dick, this is Murray the K. How you grooving? Well, he hit me with every cliche that you could ever imagine. And meanwhile, I'm like, Murray? He says, yeah, Dick, I picked up the rag that you put down, and it's really groovy. And then he goes into this big pitch. Apparently, he managed a Canadian singer named Tony Kosanek. And he had picked up a copy of the paper. It was called Action World back then. And he wanted me to do a story on the guy that he was repping. Meanwhile, word has now spread throughout the building, apparently, that the new guy up in 195 magazine is on the phone with Murray the K. So every secretary, mailroom clerk, and guy that works in the office under 20 is in front of my desk. I got this huge crowd of people in front of my desk. And people are looking, is he talking to me or Surrey? What's he saying? And meanwhile, I'm talking to him. We end the conversation. Crowd leaves. 10 minutes go by. It's nice and quiet. The phone rings, and it's my boss, Jim. Rich, could you come up and see me for a moment? Go up to the 5th level. And he says, you're doing a really nice job here at AT&T. And he says, we're really happy with your work. But it has not escaped management's notice that you have your own publication you're working on. And if you really want to work here, you're going to have to decide whether you're going to work for AT&T or whether you're going to do your publication. Well, I thought about it for about a month and a half. They sent me on an assignment to interview Mark Rudd from Students from a Democratic Society. Last article I ever wrote was, can a person under 30 find happiness in a large corporation? And I guess my answer was I left AT&T to start the Good Times. Two interviews that actually made Good Times, they're in the 20th anniversary issue that we put out. First of all, the famous Eat a Peach interview. Dwayne Allman, real simple, 19-year-old girl from Hofstra University, gets to interview Dwayne Allman at the Fillmore. She writes this fantastic interview with him. And we get a letter from Capricorn Records saying that the Eat a Peach interview in Good Times was always Dwayne's favorite interview of any interview he ever did. And they wanted to know if it would be all right if they could name the album after the interview Eat a Peach. Now, the Eat a Peach interview came real simple. There was a quote in there that I thought was fantastic. Ellen asked Dwayne, real simple, how do you feel about the peace movement? This must have been 70, 71, I guess. And he said to her rather flippantly, every time I go back to Georgia, I eat a peach for peace. I thought that was a great quote, and I blew it up real big as part of the article. Today, Wikipedia and some of the others have written stories about the fact that the Eat a Peach album was named after an interview, and as they put it, an obscure New York local publication. It's contrary to belief. People thought he was killed by a peach truck when he had his motorcycle accident. The Eat a Peach album is named after the Good Times. So that was the first thing that really put us on the map.
Right.
Then we started getting interviews with big people. Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead. One of my writers, Jay Itkowitz, who's now a big-time lawyer. He's got 5 law firms in Manhattan. Back then, Jay looked like Jerry Garcia. He looked like one of the Furry Freak brothers from the Gilbert Shelton cartoon. He climbed on stage at Queens College, and he went right up to Garcia and he said, your publicist won't talk to us. We were bold in those days. And he said, we want to interview you. And Garcia said, my guy won't talk to you? He says, come backstage after the concert, and I'll be glad to talk to you. He gave us one of the longest, best interviews we ever did. It's like 3 or 4 pages that we reprinted in there. Wow. So that was a real big thing with that. And then the thing that just put us over the top was 75, the Bruce Springsteen interview. I had a guy writing for me. He was my managing editor called Glenn Brumman. Today, Glenn Brumman is vice president of Epic Records. He won the Grammy for the Forrest Gump soundtrack. Back when I knew Glenn, he had been president of the Queens College Student Association. He was a 5-year man at Queens College. And when I had heard that he was driving cars for Hertz between LaGuardia and Kennedy. And I said to one of the guys, one of the Queens College guys that was writing for me, he was such an incredibly intelligent guy. Why is he doing this? So I got in contact with him. I said, hey, how would you like to come work for Good Times and write for us? So Glenn joined the staff. One day he comes to me and he says, listen, there's a guy I'd like to put on the cover of Good Times. You probably never heard of him, but there's a publication, a guy named John Landau is editor of a publication called Crawdaddy out of Boston. And they're going to put this guy on the cover, and if we do it, we'll be the second paper or magazine in the United States, or in the world, to do it. I said, who is he? He said, Bruce Springsteen. I said, you're right, never heard of him. And I looked at him, and I said, Glenn, let me ask you a question. Do you really think this guy's going to be big? And Glenn said, yeah, I really do. I said, well, if you think he's going to be big, because I always let my editors make the decisions as to who did the covers and stuff, I said, fine, go with it. We, in fact, did become the second publication to run him. We had a young girl from Queens College, 17 years old, Mary Alfieri, who took pictures of the Springsteen concert. About 6 months after that, we got a call from Newsweek. They said, we want to run a cover story on Bruce Springsteen, but nobody has pictures. We understand you had a photographer that shot a concert of his. They bought the picture for $500 from Mary. She got the cover of Newsweek. That was the famous week that Time and Newsweek both did Springsteen. Yeah. And she had that.